So what the hell is happening in our country? Well, I'll tell you. Everything that I told you was coming is here, and I'll explain in a second. But we're in this place to where the news media won't even recognize what's really going on. We're in this place where you don't know who to believe. You don't know what's true, what's not. We're in this place where Facebook can edit us and say we don't have the facts, even though we do, and they never ask us for those facts until after they ban us. But then they can ban people and say, yeah, well, we found out X, Y, and Z. But they don't have to show their work. They don't have to show how somebody is connected to this bad guy or that bad guy. We must, but they don't. Is there anyone within the sound of my voice that doesn't want justice for George Floyd? Is there anybody? Is there anybody? This is not 1957. This isn't Emmett Till. Americans want justice. You know, these people now that are coming out because the autopsy has shown that he was possibly, well, the autopsy says he was. He was on fentanyl and also speed. And so what does that mean? What does that mean? Nothing. It means nothing. He was still killed by somebody kneeling on his neck. So it doesn't matter. But why fight against the truth of what was in his body? Yeah, so he was on that. Okay, does that excuse the cop? No. Is there anyone within the sound of my voice that doesn't think that black lives matter? And is there anyone within the sound of my voice that don't think that all lives are equal? All men and women are equal. Now, I understand saying all lives matter makes everybody upset because they're really trying to focus on the black lives. But do black lives really matter? Do they? To the protesters? No, I shouldn't say that. Not to the protesters, to the rioters, to the looters, to the people of Antifa. Do black lives really matter? You know, it wasn't until yesterday that I think it was Jake Tapper actually tweeted this out. A retired police captain who was shot to death. He was 71 years old. He would do part-time work at this pawn shop in St. Louis. Well, his slaying was caught live on Facebook. This is very graphic if you happen to be watching us. But I want you to listen to what is being said here. He gets into an altercation with a guy trying to steal a TV and is shot down in the streets. Watch and listen.
Come on, OG, stay with me. Come on, OG. Come on, OG. Come on, OG, stay with me. Come on, OG. Come on, OG. Come on, OG. Come on, OG. Damn, man, over some TVs, cuz. Over some TVs, man. For real. That's somebody's granddaddy, cuz. Man, what y'all trying to do? You talking about y'all kill this man over some TVs, cuz. Over some TVs, cuz. You hear me? That you can get, cuz. Over some TVs, cuz.
That has nothing. This has nothing to do with George Floyd. Nothing. And that didn't have anything to do with politics either. Nothing. That was just looting. That was just greed. That's all that was. That was a senseless death. Do black lives really matter? 4 black American men and 1 biracial woman have been killed in the riots. Not by the police, but by the rioters. Now, what's happening here? Well, you know the pallet of bricks story that was going around. Kansas City discovered pallets of rocks and bricks near protest sites on Sunday. Now, if you follow social media, you might have heard this. We haven't made a big deal out of it because I wanted to make sure that we could track down the sources and we could verify. So I can't verify. Well, let me just tell you what I can verify. Police in Kansas City now have verified that these bricks and rocks were staged near protest sites around the city. The head of the department said, "We've learned and discovered stashes of bricks and rocks in and around the plaza and Westport to be used during the riot." So now who's doing this? Kansas City police say they don't have any idea, quote, who put them there. "I don't think they're doing any type of construction or anything like that. This was there for nefarious use." Now, these have been found all over the country. Is something going on? Well, any construction site worker would know bricks are very expensive. They're not left out in the street overnight because they're very expensive and they're things that people steal all the time. So nobody just dumps a pile of bricks in the street. So that's why people are protecting themselves. Now people are breaking the law even. Now there's a gun store owner in Los Angeles that used an AR-15 to be able to protect his store. Sorry, not a gun store, a liquor store. A liquor store. Meanwhile, the Democrats want to take our guns away. So what is really happening? What's really happening here? As we arm ourselves, as riots spread, as black people are gunned down in the street, what's happening here is the riots have spread from the Middle East, then over to Europe, and now to the Americans. The radicals, the socialists, the communists, the Islamists are uniting. And they're not doing it in some convention. They're not voting. They're not calling each other up. They're just seeing the opportunity to destabilize and destroy capitalism and the Western way of life. Does any of this sound familiar? I told you in 2016 that the last year, if Donald Trump were elected in the last year, there would be a depression. And we would see government programs unlike anything we've ever seen before. And there would be riots in the streets. I've been telling you the summer of '68 was going to happen. The summer of rage was coming. Unfortunately for me, I'm just early on it. I'm bad with timing. I've told you that the whole time. But I also told you something else. I've been telling you for years that you have to be a man or woman of honor and raise up the next Washington or Lincoln. Because there would be a time that trust would be so lost you wouldn't know who to listen to. That you needed the Spirit to be so strong in you that when the Spirit said, stop, go the other way, you knew that voice and you would stop and go the other way because you didn't know what was around the next corner. We are living these times now. I told you we wouldn't be able to believe anybody or anything, even our own eyes and ears. Well, today is that day. You can't believe anything. Don't retweet anything that you haven't verified yourself. And I want to give you a couple of examples. Because when you see something and it agrees with your worldview, well, you can cause all kinds of trouble by retweeting it. And let me give you an example of that. There was a video that went around, and let me show you the video that went around first. This is of a police officer, and it got millions of retweets. It's a police officer pulling a gun on a crowd in Manhattan. Watch. There she goes. She pulls her gun out. Now, that went out everywhere. Now let me show you what Bill de Blasio said after he saw it. He didn't just retweet it. He went in on a press conference and said this.
There's a video going around of a police officer in the middle of a situation that admittedly looked chaotic, but where protesters were in front of that police officer drew his gun at some point yesterday. We have to always know it is not the place of an officer to pull a gun in the middle of a crowd, knowing that there are peaceful protesters in that crowd. That is unacceptable. That is dangerous. And I want you to note on that video how a superior officer immediately came over and moved that officer away from that crowd. That officer should have his gun and badge taken away today. There will be an investigation immediately to determine the larger consequences.
Right. So the larger consequences, there was an investigation immediately. Well, there wasn't an investigation. We try everything in the media now. So what happened, the best way to correct this was to go right directly to Twitter. And that's what the police union did. And they dumped the full tape. And here's the full tape. Watch. Here you see a white shirt, which is a leadership position. There's the one with a gun. But did you notice what had happened? First, now the commanding officer did not move them away. Watch what happens to this officer right here. Somebody throws a brick at her head and she goes down. Then the crowd starts to rush because they see an officer down. And so they start to rush and they pull all of these officers and put all of these officers up against this building or this framework where they're doing work on this building, push them all the way back. They're pretty much cornered. That's when an officer draws their gun and says, "Back up." And the crowd backs up. The officer was not then removed by a leadership position. They were not removed. They patted them on the back to say thank you. It was entirely appropriate. But why did Bill de Blasio do it? Two reasons. One, it fits his worldview. So the minute he saw it, he just accepted it to be true because he believes that all police officers are bad. So it fits his worldview. So he doesn't need any more information. He just goes on and says, this is bad, and that officer should have his gun and badge taken away immediately. Okay. Don't put yourself in that situation. So anything that agrees with your worldview, don't just retweet it. You must have credibility. Make sure you search. Make sure you look, go to trusted sources, any source that you have that is trusted, and look at it. Ask people before you retweet it. You can't dishonor your own name. Somebody needs to be honorable. Somebody needs to be trustworthy, and that somebody is you.